Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Carbon Experts Live. This is One Click LCA's discussion series where we talk to smart people about important topics, and today is no exception. We are really excited today to be hosting Dijon Marples-Wall, who is a senior carbon consultant at Amey. So Dijon, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks so much. Really looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And as always, I am joined today by my co-host, Travis Dahl, who is an LCA and EPD expert here at One Click LCA. So really quick, before we get into this episode, if you are joining us on the Livestorm platform or you're joining us from our LinkedIn live stream, please jump into the chat or the comment section. Let us know where you're calling in from today. We have a global audience and we love to see where everyone is joining from. So please jump in there. And as always, this is a live Q&A session. So please, as you have questions for Dijon or Travis, throw them into the questions tab, put them in the comments link. We will be collecting those questions and we will ask them when we get to the live Q&A. So as you come up with questions, please do share them. And speaking of questions, we do have quite a few moderators who are working behind the scenes as always. We have April, who is our producer. And then we have Asha, Chris, and Laura, who are going to be communicating with you guys in the chat, both on LinkedIn and in Livestorm. So as you guys have questions, they'll be collecting them and we can pose them to Dijon towards the end of the episode. But they'll also be answering your questions live for those questions that can have a quick answer. So please, you'll be able to engage with them there. The background folks are a huge part of the show. They're a huge part of what makes it work. So we want to give them their credit. Now, what to expect today? We'll start by having a conversation between Dijon and Travis about what strategies Dijon uses to achieve sustainable infrastructure design. So we'll be talking about infrastructure today, which is a really exciting topic, a really important topic. So I think this conversation is going to be fantastic. Can't wait to see where it goes. And then we'll challenge Dijon to answer a couple questions that we have prepared for him. And then after our questions, we'll go to your questions. So like I said before, keep those questions coming, put them in the comment section, put them in the questions tab. Wherever you put them, we'll find them. And then we do have folks coming from all over the world. So we've got folks from Ireland and India and Iran and Canada and Spain and the UK and the US. So we have folks coming from all around the world, and it's great to have you guys with us today. And now, without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Travis to more properly introduce our guest and get the conversation going.
Thanks, Eileen. Welcome, everybody, to the 9th episode of Carbon Experts Live. This is One Click LCA's series of lively discussions with experts driving forward low-carbon construction. In case you've missed any of our previous sessions, you can check them out on our YouTube channel, which you'll find at youtube.com/@OneClickLCA. Our topic today is decarbonizing infrastructure, taking a whole life carbon view at project and contract levels. And we're thrilled to be joined today by Dijon Marples-Wall, as Aileen mentioned. Dijon is the senior carbon consultant for Amey in the UK, and they're focusing on sustainable infrastructure solutions and complex facilities. And we're pleased to have him on the show today. Thanks for joining us, Dijon.
Absolute pleasure.
So something that we always kick off with is our opening question. We kind of want to know your personal story. You were telling us a little bit just came online here, and how'd you get started? How'd you end up here?
For goodness sake, let us sit around and tell sad stories. It was a long drawn out. So I've really come into this into this industry and this space really by the kind of the side entrance. But so my initial, when I left university, I was doing sound production, music, and I was very sort of focused on the arts. Part of that was sort of my musical background. I've been in bands, done sound engineering and recording, and then ended up getting involved heavily in acoustics. So one of the modules at university was on acoustics, and the guy who headed our faculty up was very much involved with the effects of noise on human health. And when I left uni, I decided to go back and study a bit more of acoustics. I really loved it, and especially the impact of noise and vibration on human health. Graduated, got set up with a small startup consultancy, not too far away from where I was living, and loved it, and kind of then kind of outgrew it a little bit and moved up. I got a call from Amey to come and join their acoustics team, to come and work on some transport infrastructure projects, which was great, which was fantastic. The way that Amey is structured is that we're like an environmental team. It's quite an umbrella term, and we get involved in all sorts of different projects, and we get a chance to look at other disciplines and work very carefully and closely with I was working with the AQ guys, the air quality guys, and the guys who were working on human health impacts, and the guys who were writing environmental impact assessments. And one day I got a call from my former boss, who said, "Oh, do you fancy you're working with a lot of traffic data and working up with noise models? Would you be interested in looking at GHG and carbon modeling?" And I said, "Yeah, sounds good. I mean, that's one of my problems. I never say no. So yeah, that's fine. Send it to me. Let's take a look at it." She sent me a copy of the project, and it was about National Highways who head up our road networks in England. We're looking to create the first carbon neutral road. Sounds great. Send it over to me. I want to get involved. So she got me involved. She sent me on a load of training, and not so very long after that, she's very persuasive. Got a very persuasive way about her. And not long after that, she said, "Right, okay, did you enjoy that?" "Yeah, it was great. Do you want to do some more?" "Great, let's do some more. Do you want to be in? Should we make a team? Should we get a team set up and do this regularly? We'll make this our day jobs." "Yeah, let's do it." That was probably about 3 years ago, and then some stuff happened about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, when everybody started coughing and sneezing, and then in the middle of all that, we formed a team up, and here we all are. So I now sit within our climate resilience and adaptation team. We're back with environment, which is really exciting, because we're now working with them on creating nature-based solutions, on upskilling our company to become PAS 2080 accredited for all our infrastructure projects, and it's just a really exciting place to be. But I look back at where I've come from. It's like I used to love going snowboarding, and it was always amazing when I kind of come to the bottom of the mountain and think, did I come from all the way up there? That's crazy. That's kind of what I'm doing now. I'm like kind of looking where I've come from. I think it's very different, but I wouldn't change it for the world.
How do your skills in noise mapping and sound engineering play into sustainability?
I think like an attention for detail. When you're working through big data sets, you have to kind of. I think you kind of have to. You either love it or you hate it. I think there's something about that. I kind of really got into doing that with. I was using a couple of software packages, both Noise Map and Sound Plan, where we're working line by line, with data entry and kind of looking for trends and see, we change a couple of scenarios and see what happens, and you kind of create an environment and then testing those environments and seeing what changes. And that was a really easy move to go from doing that for noise and watching what happens to the emissions plan and the numbers, to move it over into carbon and GHG, and seeing what happens to the numbers if we change this specification for that specification. What's that going to do? And also, my favorite bit of it is because numbers are quite abstract, right? You kind of look at it and think, oh, okay, well, that's 3,000 tons of CO2. well, is that good? Is that bad? What does that mean? And it's the same with decibels. You know, it's 70 dB bad, 72 dB good, or vice versa, or what does that mean? So having to be able to, as you can tell, I don't have any trouble with speaking. So I love getting in front of a client and saying, well, what does this mean? How do we explain what's going on here? How do we explain these trends? How do we explain how we can make impacts on this? So that was another nice sort of comfortable transition from acoustics to GHG. And ultimately, in terms of what I do, they come from the same place. The emissions come from road vehicles and from construction sites.
Right. So next question, I think, is maybe pretty rudimentary, but a broad topic as well. Since you're focused on infrastructure, why is it so impactful on the environment?
So Alex Gilbert, our managing director of Amey Consulting, he uses a phrase that isn't particularly well liked in our company, but it's the truth. And the truth is that the construction industry is quite a dirty industry, ours specifically. Building roads, building railways, we are creating emissions in every life cycle stage, heavy emissions at every life cycle stage. We've got to build these things, we've got to decommission what's there, we've got to deconstruct, then we've got to start constructing, we've got earthworks. Then when it's built and it's done, it's going to be for vehicles that are going to be creating emissions. It's going to be drawing down energy. And then when that's all done with, we've got to replace it, we've got to maintain it, we've got to refurbish it. And when the design life's expired, we've got to come around and do it all over again. So it accounts for, I think, depending on which number you pick, I think it was a WF figure that was around 45%, I think, of CO2 emissions, worldwide CO2 emissions, were from the construction trade, from built environment. Please don't quote me on that, but it's around that figure. I don't know. It depends on which source you quote, but it's significant. It's a significant, impactful industry, and because of that, yes, that's obviously a dreadful thing. We want to change that. But what I do all the time, like what you guys do, is to find out where the hotspots are, right? If we're doing a decarbonization for a scheme, it's no good trying to, yes, it's good to kind of work on some of the smaller elements, the sort of the marginal gains, but we want to be hitting the big stuff first. So we feel like there's loads of buzz around this industry. There's loads of there are centers of excellence and communities of practice, and people want to do something about it. So it's a good space to be in that sense.
Yeah, totally. So with the impacts on the environment for infrastructure, what is climate resilience? I guess let's start, just how would you define climate resilience?
So all of our projects, we are kind of splitting them down the middle, almost. It's maybe not quite a 50-50 split, but there's certainly a dividing line, a blurry dividing line between how do we stop this project from doing any more damage to the environment, or inhibit the amount of damage that this is going to do to the environment, and how do we build this project in a way that copes with the damage that has already been done to the environment. And that's kind of where the sort of the resilience part of it kicks in. And this is a real tension that we're going through, and I'll maybe touch on it in a bit more detail later. But it's all around, for me at least, when we're working with a client, if that's National Highways, or a governmental arm's length body, or a local authority who wants to know, if I put this really cheap road in, this cheap product that's quite high in CO2, is it going to get better? How long is it going to last? How resilient is it going to be to extreme climate events? Because if we're going to have to come back again in 10 years time, if the design life's 15, 20 years, and we have to come back in 5 years or 10 years, we're committing more CO2 by having to do that. And ultimately for the client, they're still in the mindset of it's going to cost us more money. Budgets in the UK for local authorities are really heavily squeezed. They've got to account for every pound spent, and because of that, but they're also getting pressure from above and below to hit targets. So people are, in the UK, attitudes are changing. They want to see that local authorities and arm's length bodies are going to meet these ambitions that have been set. and the government are also getting that pressure. And so because of that, they're pushing the arm's length bodies and the local authorities to make sure that they hit their targets, because that's how the government's going to hit their target. So being able to have that conversation between how's this project going to reduce carbon and therefore inhibit or limit the amount of damage, how does that compare with how do we make this asset so that we don't have to build it again because it's been damaged by what we once would have called a freak accident or a freak extreme climate event, but is now becoming more and more prevalent. So that's the resilience question that we pose to our clients.
And how do you find those conversations tend to go in situations where a governmental organization might have limited funds today, but trying to get that message across that they need to be approaching this with the long term in mind?
It can vary, and I think a lot of the time we speak with people. I think there's a real continuum with the level at which our clients are on their journey, the stage in which our clients are on their journey. So sometimes they'll come to us and say, we've got no idea where to start. We want to do something. How do we build our roads better so that we don't have to build them again in 5 years' time, or we don't have to do as much repair work? How do we write a strategy? We don't know what we don't know. So can you help us sort of plug some of those gaps? So we can come in at the very early stage before we start talking about using modeling, using decarbonization, looking at their specifications. Let's pull it right back to the start. So, right, what do you want to get out of this? What are your targets? What are you aiming to do? So that can often be a conversation starter. Sometimes we'll come in and a client is way ahead of where we are as a construction firm, and they'll say, we want to try all this stuff out, but we don't know how good it is. Can you run some models? Can you help us? We think this road is going to last. This road surface course, we're using recycled rubber crumb, or we're using cementitious grout to layer up on the surface course. We think we're going to get an extra 10 years. Can you test it? And what's that going to mean in terms of carbon? So we can come in at that point and sort of test out some of the thinking of some of our clients, and then we get guys who are kind of somewhere around the middle. That they want some advice, they want some ideas on either how to meet targets for this carbon budget, or to create something that's going to be resilient so that they don't have to, it's going to reduce their maintenance burden. And it's only by virtue of us trying to explain to them and give them the understanding of thinking of an asset in terms of its whole life. Don't just think I've got to build something and then in 20 years' time, I've got to get rid of it and rebuild another one. Let's think of where it is, of the things that you have to do between there and there. And then only by using something like one-click, some software that we can plot out that and make it really clear and easy to see for them, can they start thinking, okay, well, we think we've got some, we can decarbonize at the construction stage, but we can also decarbonize during the maintenance and operation of this project. That's a really powerful conversation.
It sounds like the majority of your clients are public institutions, but I imagine you have some private institutions as well that are looking for projects built. How do they approach these projects differently, and how much does ESG play a role in their approach to it?
I think often with our local authority clients and our ALB clients, they're very restricted in terms of what they can deliver. They have standards to meet, not only for environmental standards, but they've also got specification documents, which makes it quite not impossible, but it adds a layer of complexity and difficulty in terms of what they can achieve and what they can trial out, because they've got a lot of scrutiny on them, right? But that's not necessarily the case with some of our sort of individual clients, our direct clients, if you like. They often tend to be more based around how they can recover things. So we worked with a school very, very recently, and yes, carbon played a huge part of that, in terms of how they manage their space better, but also things like how can they recover some of their waste material to be reused for things. So we were encouraging them to recover some of their clippings and hedge cuttings for use of on-site mulch to make like a community garden. So it means that they kind of got a bit of scope that they can trial extra things. They can, they're in a freer space, I think it's fair to say. Although that said, I'm still kind of a creative guy at heart, and I like to know the rules so that I can break the rules. So if I know that there's something where we think, oh, it's got to have 40% recycled asphalt planings in, who's gonna fall over if we put 45 in? What's going to happen? Is the world going to stop turning if we use 50% RAP? Can we go back to to somebody like SES, the environmental standards wing of National Highways, and say, come on, give us an extra 5%, give us an extra 10%. But I think certainly in terms of individual clients, they're in a bit of a they're in a better place to do so, but they don't have the funds quite as much. So we have to be sort of clever and fleet of foot. We have to be cute how we deploy some of that decarbonisation. And then just coming back on that, because I think the ESG part is a really critical one, and kind of its own thing as well. So yes, obviously we heavily get involved in ESG scoring and governance practices. But one of the things that really sort of lights the bulbs in my mind is how we look to regenerate local economies. So a lot of our clients are they're in areas where, especially for local authorities, they're in spaces where local economies, since deindustrialization in the UK has plotted out through its journey, there are areas that need stimulation. They need regeneration, green regeneration, pleasant looking regeneration, amenity spaces. So being able to come in and offer wetlands areas or micro wildflower meadows, like I've got here in Sheffield that we worked on with the Greater Green Scheme, where we've got to put in some new drainage, but we augmented that by having some wildflower meadows, so that people can come and bring their kids and bring a picnic. They can bring the sandwiches, and and made what was quite a literally a grey, dreary space into something that was pleasant and nice to be around. That's a really powerful bit of the ESG tool set that I think is sometimes lost a little bit in the noise. But that's a big part of what we get involved in here.
I think this ties back a little bit into the climate resilience piece, but a lot of the infrastructure that you're building, I suspect it's not on virgin land. You're maybe replacing existing infrastructure.
Correct. Yeah.
How do we approach recovering environmental ecosystems? Like, what does that look like?
That's a great question. I think it for us especially, it depends on where we're starting from. So in terms of recovering a space, we've got a climate crisis. We've also got a biodiversity crisis, and one of the exciting things that we're kind of going through within the sustainability solutions team here at Amey, by putting us back with and joining us up with our colleagues in environment, we're now offering up true nature-based solutions. We're able to look at areas and rather than maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when our clients were saying to us, right, tell us what we can do to decarbonize a bit, and then we'll just offset the rest. Now people are realizing you can't just do that. You can't just say, let me just give you this money and we'll just make it all go away. Like, people don't want that. It's opaque. It's hard to sell that to the public. It's not a good look. It can be quite sketchy. It can be open to abuse, and we don't want that. We want to be making a difference at project level. So, for us to be able to come in on a project that we did up in Cumbria, where they were replacing a junction with it was a staggered junction with a roundabout, a little mini roundabout. So it's not the most exciting of projects, I'm sure, for people who get involved in junctions and roundabouts. It's really exciting, but so I don't want to do them a disservice. But it's not groundbreaking. Okay, it's not innovative necessarily. But as part of that scheme, we were able to liaise and have dialogue with the planning authority and with National Highways to say, look, don't just give money and just send this all away somewhere. Do something here. put in a wetlands area. You need to put some suds drainage in anyway. So why don't you plant it? Why don't you make it into an amenity space? This is a nice environment. Why don't we recover some of that space that had been previously unwilded, de-wilded, and let's revegetate it. Let's get some habitat in there. Let's encourage some wildlife in there. Let's make a difference. And they went for it, and it's paid dividends.
I'm sure you guys are familiar with the upcoming mandate for biodiversity and net gain in the UK, and it doesn't apply to infrastructure for a couple of years yet. But it sounds to me like you're already getting prepared for it.
And why not? Why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we want to? It's not just about doing something when we've been told to do it. Why don't we? Lead them by the nose a little bit and say, well, look what we can achieve. It's no good just saying, oh, we'll do it because we've got to do it. Oh, okay. Why don't we look to pull something together to inspire people? You asked me the question about how do we recover environments. I think we've got to change attitudes first, Travis. I think we've got to inspire people to say, look, this is what we can achieve when we're allowed to.
And what advice would you give for other markets outside of the UK? How do we implement something like this in other markets where that conversation hasn't even really begun?
This comes very unnaturally to me because I like talking, but I think it's better to listen in a lot of senses. I'm always told you've got one mouth and two ears for a reason. It's just that my mouth works twice as hard as my ears do. But I think it's important that we listen for people who are in countries. So we especially just went through a period where people didn't have access. All of a sudden, everything was locked down. Nobody could get access to parks. People who didn't have garden spaces and green spaces really started to miss it. So we can't take the kids anywhere. We can't go and experience. We can't go to the woods. So all of a sudden, that changed focus very quickly. And I think having something that some exemplar schemes where we've asked the question, what do you want your cities to look like? What do you want your environments to look like? Is this what you want? Can we show you the benefits of having green space? Can we show you the benefits of better air quality? Can we demonstrate the benefits of not just resilient infrastructure, but pleasant infrastructure that looks nice, that does nice, that smells nice, that's nice to visit? I think we have to inspire our way into doing that. I think it's hard. It's a harder sell when we just feel like we're being told what to do. And I think it's on the built environment industry to be able to really flex and show what we're capable of doing.
That's such a good point. We were just talking earlier about Saskatchewan specifically, and here in Canada we have a lot of beautiful open spaces and huge expanses of land and great parks and great forests and things like that. But we also have some pretty ugly industrial spaces too, and figuring out a way to blend those a little bit, particularly on the industrial side. I could see that.
And to be realistic, it might not be that we're not going to rewild. Sheffield, where I live, is it's all heavy engineering. There's some very beautiful and some very agricultural and arable parts of Sheffield, but there's a lot of heavy engineering here in Sheffield. We output. We were one of the world's biggest steel exporters here in Sheffield. So there's vast parts of it where which is it's all concrete. So we're not going to rewild all that in a couple of years, but we can do something small and do something nice. Do something well. And if it works, if we can demonstrate that it works, then it can be replicated. It's about having a good, like with the carbon assessment, you've got to have a baseline first, right? Where are we coming from, and what does good look like? What does better look like? What does best look like? It's exactly the same process.
I love that approach. You mentioned the PAS 2080 certification earlier. Can you expand on that a little bit? What's the value of pursuing this?
So how I just said, let's not do it just because somebody's told us to do it. Let's do it because we want to do it. So we've here in the UK, National Highways have just become a PAS 2080 accredited organisation. So So they are using that standard for all of their projects. So every national highways road scheme, every network railway scheme is now they're expecting their value chain, which is us right here at Amey, and all their suppliers, all their consultants, and all their designers and engineers. They're expecting all of those projects to have whole life carbon assessments attached into those project folders. So that's for me to have been pushing for the last 2 years to say, come on, we've got a document here that tells you how to do it. Like, you can't get any, this is how we should be doing this stuff. All of a sudden, and they were like, we do. And like, we've got some strategy, and we've got a graphic, and we've got a roadmap. It's like, yeah, that's great. But I'm like, no, I want to see it being done. What are we going to do? How are we going to do this? That's massive. By National Highways and Network Rail doing that, they have pushed us as an industry to say, right, we've got to start doing this. We've got to start doing whole life carbon assessments for all of our projects, which means we've got to get our own house in order. We now have to be past 2080 accredited. So we undertook the audit with BSI, who are our wing of the ISO organization. We went through that process with them week before last, and we got a really favourable outcome. It's look, I might not get a shiny certificate before Christmas, but it checks in the post, I think. So we're really excited. More than just the certificate, it's about all the hard work that led up to that. The processes that we've put in place now, and also it's not a success in of itself. It's a vehicle for us to get proper success. How are we going to use this accreditation to do better? I think that's the important thing for me. But what it does mean is that there's now an additional layer of scrutiny on projects where before we might have been said, oh well, we didn't budget for carbon assessments, or we didn't know about it, and we don't really want to do it. It's refocused. It's sharpened everyone's focus on carbon. So now, in especially internally at Amey, everybody wants to know about what we're going to do for carbon on our projects. So it's done as a favor.
The thing I hear loud and clear there is taking responsibility, and something that you hear in a lot of conversations in North America. Well, I hear, I'm sure they happen elsewhere in the world as well, but I'll use the term laggards for lack of a better term. Not wanting to do things because pick your worst example. They're not doing it yet. Why should we do it? And it's a terrible example. What you guys are doing is amazing. What with a lot of your processes, I remember you telling me before how you were approaching some of the assessments previously using spreadsheets. What is the value of using software tools over a spreadsheet?
So, and I'm sure this is not just unique to Amey, but we as an industry. So Mark Baptist, who took our team over, had a great phrase for it. He was heavily involved in some very, very big sort of management consultancy firms on change process and change management, which is really, it's the heart of what we're doing here. We're trying to change things, and his mentality around that was that you can't just think your way out of complex problems with the same thinking that we got into them. We need new ideas. We need to get there. We need to we need to have dialogue. We need to open it up to leverage the power of the group was a big thing that Mark had said, and I think that always stuck with me. And so just coming in using an Excel spreadsheet to try and decarbonize a project for a 120-year life cycle, going through every maintenance intervention, you are literally just throwing bodies at a wall to try and make it work. It's so time consuming. We were getting projects that our clients were coming to us with questions like that I just said earlier before. How do we know if this is going to cost more carbon in the long run by putting something that was lower in capital carbon to something that was slightly more in terms of carbon, but was going to last longer. There was no way that we could do that. We just didn't have the resource, we didn't have the time, we didn't have the capacity. So being able to do that at the click of a mouse it's like the lights have just come on, right? It's made everything easier for me. So there's that, and also about probably the last word on this is about traceability. You know, anybody can go in and edit those spreadsheets. Anybody can put in any carbon factor they like, and unless that is really heavily audited and scrutinized, which if you're working with like 5-10 spreadsheet tabs, even that's a really difficult process to go through. So we've got to think about how the auditor approaches this. Having those data points which are EPD backed, which are third party verified, which are updated by very capable third party software specialists is just it's a godsend. And because of that, we were able to show and demonstrate the process that we use for carbon modeling using OneClick on our projects. The BSI auditors for our PAS 2080 audit, they loved it. So that kind of speaks for itself, I think.
And I can imagine the scope of work for the auditor and the risk of error is just huge.
Oh, it's a breeze. Yeah, it's a breeze. It's much easier.
Well, I am going to jump in here. This has been a fantastic conversation, really interesting to hear your perspective on a number of issues. So we do have questions from our live audience that we want to get to. And we also have, as I mentioned before, we have the questions that we've queued up for you. So this first one, Dion, it's pretty broad, but we want to know, if you had the power to change any one thing in the industry, what would it be?
Oh, just one thing. I want to change everything. Rip it all up and start it again. There's no way I would do it. But if I was in charge, I tell you, it'd be very, very different. Now, I think one of the key areas that I always complain about is about data quality. Like, can we get better data? How do we improve that data quality? So having the ability, I think if I had the power to change anything, wave of a magic wand, I think it would be that every single one of our suppliers, for every one of their materials, would have an EPD backed data point. Oh, it'd be amazing.
I think everyone here at OneClick LCA agrees with you and would love to see that.
It's in the post, I promise.
Just an anonymous piece. Excuse me. Just had an interesting conversation earlier this week about an organization that's a stone organization. I won't name them for the time being, but they're looking at producing EPD data for the entire supply chain, starting with the quarriers and progressing through the entire supply chain, which is, usually we're working backwards from that and trying to fill in that upstream data. So,
that sounds amazing. It sounds like being sat on a beach with a coconut, lovely warm sun. That sounds amazing. That's the dream.
Hopefully that is a sort of omen for the future, and we'll see more of that from more organizations. Now, Dion, we have another question from last month's guest. So that was Jeremy Field, who is Senior Sustainability Advisor at Introba. And he asked, how do we bring buildings and infrastructure analysis together so that we consider the built environment as a whole?
Do you know what? I think you could probably substitute any two of those things for pretty much anything in the design and build space. And I think one of the major problems that we have as an industry is siloing. That there is loads of good work being done, but it's being done because I'm busy. I've got to get this done, and then got to ship it out to the client. It's, being sat adjacent to somebody in the team to say, right, okay, building specialists should be sat next to carbon specialists, should be sat next to BNG specialists, should be sat next to landscape visual impact specialists. Opening some of that conversation up to other teams. So it's not just a nice to have. I think if we're going to get there, if we're going to have joined up coherent solutions to problems like we've got with GHG emissions, we've got to talk and we've got to listen and learn from each other.
Yeah, and it seems like that is a trend that we're seeing across the board, is just more communication, better communication, more data. everyone working together towards this goal instead of tackling it sort of small sector by small sector. We need to take a bigger view approach.
That's it. Think of what think of what good looks like. That's what I said earlier. What is the goal? What's it going to look like that you've got, and who can help you achieve that? If we can't do that, we're not going to do that individually. We've got to open that up and engage with each other on that to get there.
And Dion, maybe this is you're kind of an unprepared question for you, but with organizations that, like with the siloing effect, it makes sense to do that in a large organization where you have interdisciplinary groups that can work in the same room together. But how would you approach that in smaller organizations that maybe are just focused on one thing?
So one of the things that big organizations tend to do that I'm not sure whether this does happen at smaller organizations. I don't tend to see a lot of smaller organizations get involved, and they absolutely should. Is about building these centers of excellence, these communities of practice, to be sitting in on forums, to be involved in spaces that other areas of the built environment spaces is kind of sitting in. I think that's a big thing. Raising awareness through whatever means that might be. We harness the power of social media, and get involved in projects which are maybe not necessarily the biggest in terms of the size of the project, but that gets a lot of attention. I think that's really helpful. And also, I think there's probably the converse is true, that we as an organization try and bring in small and medium-sized enterprises through some of our frameworks to work on projects. To be involved to that extent, I think would be really useful for smaller consultancies and design houses to offer something that not necessarily the bigger firms can. That they specialize in something, whether that's timber frame construction or alternative pavement specification, to do something very specific, very niche, and do it very well. And to framework your way into larger organizations might be one way, but to just be involved in the same space and to be having conversations, I think is a powerful thing to do, and is probably half the battle.
Yeah, having all those organizations, big and small, working together.
Yeah,
it's really what we need. Well, we are about to go into the live Q&A from the audience, but before we do that, we have a question for you, the audience. And so if you are joining us in our live storm platform, we're going to put up a poll here, and we want to know if you would like us to contact you to schedule a free consultation to talk about how you can use software tools and how you can use software to do LCA to reduce the embodied carbon of your infrastructure or building projects. So if you're interested in that, please click yes on the poll. If you're joining us on LinkedIn, we don't have the poll there, but we will be putting a link to our book a demo page in the chat. So if you do want to schedule one of those free consultations with us, go ahead and click that link, and it'll walk you through the steps to schedule that. And now we will move on to questions from our live audience. So our first question should appear here on the screen in a moment. All right. So where do you see the future of carbon modeling and carbon accounting headed?
I think when I joined the team and when Mark took me on as part of the climate team, he said, "Look, we're going to be leading the way with the business in terms of carbon modeling, because we're not doing anything. We're doing very little. We're going to be doing that for a number of years, but then as time goes on, that capability specifically for carbon accounting and modeling is going to be done more and more within design teams. So, and highways engineers are going to do they're going to draw up and draft up designs, and they're going to carbon account. So we need to be there for them so we will effectively move from a modeling capacity to an advisory and an audit capacity. So instead of us kind of doing it, we're going to be at the start to sort of get them started, set it up, show them how to use one-click, show them how, where we get EPDs, show them how we decarbonize schemes, let them run wild and run free, use the software, play with the software, account, report, come back to us. Then we can say, right, okay, show me what you've done. Where have you sourced that factor from? What product specification is this? This is one that we've used before. How does that meet specification standards? So being able to come in at like an advisory role at the end and QA projects to provide some quality assurance and some soft auditing, I think, is probably where we're going to go in terms of the transport infrastructure. In terms of built environment, I wonder if they're kind of, it felt to me, especially when I was down in London with you guys, that they're kind of already there. That a lot of the developers, a lot of design houses are already doing that. So I think we're maybe lagging a little bit. But certainly in the next sort of 5 years, 8 years, that feels kind of the direction that it's going. That it's going to become more and more the business as usual. That you'll provide a design, and the carbon report will be attached to it.
So a little bit like what you and Travis discussed earlier about more of that responsibility.
Yeah, very much so.
Directly on designers, not necessarily on outside consultants, which should move things forward.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So
don't be scared of that. That's going to be opened up to people who are going to bring new ideas that we might not have thought of yet. That's great. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So our next question is, how should we view and approach nature-based solutions in the context of decarbonizing infrastructure, both at the contract level and during the pre-design phase?
We're not there yet by a long way, but I want, like, the next phase of my career. It's taken me this long, maybe sort of 3 to 5 years, to kind of get us to a point where past 2080 is going to start to become business as usual with what we do. I want the next phase for us to be having the nature-based solutions are the first go-to, not, oh, it's a nice to have. It's got to, we've got to really press on that button, I think, next. So it's got to be viewed as not as a nice to have. It's got to be viewed as a necessity, and as a means of sort of co-dealing with the biodiversity and climate emergencies. How we do that, I think, again, it comes back to de-siloing, to having people who are in the the landscape space, or in the habitat space, in the biodiversity space, the ecology space, sitting in and being involved and interested in some of the stuff that we're doing in terms of GHG reduction, and vice versa. So at contract level, it might look like, so contracts is all about specifications, about, so we'd have we've got a road which we would normally have this amount of depth of sub base, this amount of base course, this amount of surface course, that amount of footway. Well, let's start looking at how we can apply, as part of the base specification, the recovery of verges or micro wildflower areas, or so again, it comes back to the point I was trying to make earlier about starting from understand your baseline and make small gains. Do something small, do something well. If that gets applied to something at a contract level as a base specification, that could be really powerful. We're talking about wide areas of counties, of multiple counties, of combined authority space, where all of a sudden now we're including micro wildflower meadows across hundreds of kilometers of road. That's a big change for something that only happens, we'll add one little bit in, but that one little bit gets replicated across a wide network, and all of a sudden we start talking about meaningful change.
And that kind of change is so nice. Like you could say, it can have such a big impact when it's replicated that way. Not only for nature, but it's also, it's an amenity, like you mentioned earlier. Now here's a little bit of a sort of challenging question: is how to implement past 2080 with uninterested clients, and sort of who bears the cost? What strategies can you use to drive these changes?
Do you know?
interest?
So one of my team, bless her, she's really great. Izzy in my team, and she's really enthusiastic. She recently graduated, and all of her clients have been brilliant. They've been really excited and really energetic. And I said to her, look, you've not had a bad client yet. You've not had a client that doesn't want to do this. I'm not saying they're bad clients, but you don't want a client. You've not had a client that just really is digging their heels in. We don't want to do anything. We don't want to change anything. I said, well, what do we do? How do we change that? So, well, there's an in. There's always an in. And the beauty about PAS 2080, the way that it's set up, is that listen to the client about what they're telling you their interest is in. If they're coming to you saying, we haven't got any money, then they're interested in money. They're interested in saving money. Well, that's perfect. That's perfect because that sits right at the top level of reduction. Let me show you how you can save material. So you're already doing it. This is the beautiful part of it. You're already saving carbon. You're already doing it. If you are value engineering, if you are doing resource efficiency exercises and workshopping, if you are working with lean, efficient designs and small use of material, you are already saving carbon. If you are recovering some of your assets to reuse because you want to take it down, store it and use it as a strategic spare, or recycle that product as, we're planing the asphalt off and we're gonna plane it off and just relay it. Brilliant. You're already saving carbon. So let us show you how to do that. So it's not necessarily that we have to kick them up the bottom, or we have to try and sweet talk them off. I think it's just about the lens in which we use to view carbon reduction. Do you want to save money? Do you want your assets to last longer? Do you want to hit your targets? These are the conversations, and it comes down, I guess, to the pain question. Where's the pain? What's hurting you? Got no money? You got an angry mob outside your house because you told them you were going to get a target to hit for 2040 and it's not looking likely. What is it that you want us to help you with? And in terms of the costs, our business is to show them that it should not come. These are not my words. PAS 2080 is really clear. You should not be buying carbon reduction. It should align. You shouldn't be having to spend money to save carbon. That is not the purpose of what we're doing here. And I think that's you get interesting results when you do that. Initially, very reticent clients can start to soften. Think, well, actually, if we're already doing it, we just need to know how to account it and just show that we're doing it. It's like, yeah, that's it. Perfect. I've got just the software for you. Give us your bill of quants. Let's put it in an Excel spreadsheet in a one-click format. I'll run it through one click and I'll give you a carbon report. Brilliant.
That's great. That's something that we've been hearing a lot about too, is bringing it down to the financial aspect. And a lot of times these carbon saving measures seem like they're going to cost more, and maybe they do upfront, but in the long run, when you can really plot it out using a software or doing an LCA, you get to see that it is it's saving in the long run. So
that's it. It's proof of concept. Yep. That's it.
You have to bring it back to the money.
It's terrible, but it's true. It's true.
Yeah. Something that I wanted to ask you, just as you're talking about some of the things in the UK. UK is definitely a leader in the sustainability space. There's seems to be a lot of support both at the public level as well as institutional and government level as well. What do you think is from a cultural perspective? What do you think is the main driver, and how do we kind of spread that into?
We've got. I think traditionally, and in ancient times, has been a very green country. We think of like Sherwood Forest and Robin Hood, and I think we've got quite deep down. I know we're very kind of multicultural and sort of cosmopolitan sort of society now for the most part. But right deep at the heart of it, we're all hobbits here, right? So this is the Shire, right? So we're very connected with our green space, and you think, England's rolling hills and countryside, and it's kind of what we think about. So I don't think that's a tough sell for people that come or live in England at all. I think that's an easy fit. but also I think it's maybe been a bit of a culture shock, throughout the certainly in my lifetime, since the sort of mid early 80s, into the 90s and deindustrialization. The places look bleak, and to be able to show spaces which are improved and regreened, and it kind of kicks us right in the feels here in the UK. So I think it's something that comes very naturally to us here. We're lucky with that.
That's fantastic. So we only have time for one more question. We did get some more questions, but we'll talk about how you can keep the conversation going. So our last question from our audience is this: why is transitioning to a sustainability career challenging, and why are passionate fresh graduates often overlooked? We've challenged people to change, but what about the sort of younger generation that's coming up that already has this viewpoint?
Yeah, I caught part of this question as it was coming up. I thought that's a great question. I think we've got a real, I don't want to use the word crisis necessarily, but it's really hard. It's really hard to recruit at the moment. We're finding that difficult internally. I think it's a really tough market, and obviously we've got headwinds that there was the great resign, they called it, didn't they? Where people had sort of resigned after COVID. People were asking, is this what I want to do with my life? So I think there's some very sort of deep and existential questions that people have got on their mind at the moment. But I think there's reasons to be cheerful as well. So we're heavily involved with graduate assessment centres. So we'll have applicants that want to come and work for us. We took 3 on year before last, beg your pardon, and what they were doing was amazing. They're not just their energy and their ambitions and their enthusiasm, but they were bringing some really cool ideas to the table, and were really pushing us. The old guys, they were really pushing us to do new things. So why are they overlooked? I don't know. I think there's a reticence about change. Maybe there's a feeling that we've always done it that way. We want people who are just going to kind of get along and get the work done. And I hope, and I think it is the case, that is changing. That we are starting to get graduates that are coming out that are doing modules at uni that are based around alternative designs and carbon saving and reduction and life cycle analysis, and they're understanding what those terms mean. So I think it's there are reasons to be cheerful on that. And in terms of transitioning into a sustainability career, I transitioned to a sustainability career, and I think if you've got the right people around you, it's an easy sell. I'm only here because the people who brought me into it were fantastic at what they did. So it's about we've got to inspire sort of the next group of people coming into the space.
That's great. Well, we love having a positive note, and even though maybe things aren't perfect now, we see the culture shifting, we see priorities shifting. So bringing people into sustainability, but then also focusing on the younger generation, really great. Well, that, as I said, is all the time we had for live questions, but we just have a few slides to go through. Just want to remind everyone that we do have embodied carbon policy resources at oneclicklca.com/library. So check it out. There's a lot of information there if you want to learn more. We also have free training at our academy.oneclicklca.com. Our next boot camp is coming up at the end of January. So do sign up for that. These boot camps are free training, and they are open to everyone. So if you want to learn more about LCA, that's coming up in January. And we have an EPD boot camp coming up about a month after that. And lastly, if you want to keep the conversation going, take a screenshot now. We've got some contact information up on the screen for both Dijon and Travis. Connect with them. They're both obviously very passionate about these topics. So if you have questions or you want to keep this conversation going, again, feel free to contact them. And I am going to pass it back to Travis to sort of wrap things up for us today.
Yeah, thanks, Eileen. Just, I guess, a last wrap-up question for you, Dion. Well, do you have any last comments? Anything? Any thoughts you want to leave with our crowd?
Yeah, maybe what I kind of signed off with when I was down in London, which was that yes, you asked me that this is a dirty industry, but that it's on us to be able to leave cleaner, greener, more pleasant infrastructure to look at, to use, and to live around. And I think looking at the industry in those eyes with that lens, that's a way of inspiring ourselves before we start looking outwards and trying to change things.
Perfect. Great. Thanks so much. Thanks for everybody for joining us, and looking forward to seeing you all in the next session.